Okay, so this has been a long time coming. And J3.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, what, for all the places that I've been even recently talking to Jim Goodall, and the evolution of this was originally MKUltra, a discussion not only about the program, but about what does it mean to do anything in reference to our maybe private lives. You know, there's a lot of places we're going to go with MKUltra, and someone goes in for a simple psychological issue, some anxiety, and they come out with part of their brain erased. But that's down one rabbit hole. You have personal experience with government oversight.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if we should, start with your deep research on MKUltra, or if we should start with your personal experience with oversight.
Well, maybe we should start with my more personal experience, because that will give maybe the viewers a little bit of insight where I come from and why I've spent decades, let's say, researching and being a part of the development and understanding of what's going on, with all related much to that experience and other experiences that I've had with government overreach, or whatever term you want to call it. So when I was a young guy, my family and I were basically, one of my family members was involved pretty heavily in different aerospace and research of many different frequencies and whatnot. And so this person that's in my family, basically got involved with an individual who was developing a free energy machine, and his name is Joseph Newman. And Joseph Newman was a DIY scientist who developed this free energy machine that was able to measure, to put out 1 to 1.81 watts, which is not very much at the time, but this is late 70s, early 80s. And it still proved the fact that it was putting out more energy than it was taking in. And so Joe Newman, he lived in the United States, started getting just incredible press for it. He started getting international press. He got on Johnny Carson at the time. That was one of the big late night television shows. And being interviewed by these big people, and he got in, at that time, Discover Magazine, go down the list, Scientific American. Those are kind of the bigger science and media outlets that were actually promoting stuff like this. So when he started to go for the patent on it, that's when weird things started to happen. He got 6 patents in different countries for it. The United States Patent Office would not even give him a patent pending, no matter how far he fought it, whatever. So around that time, my family member individual was getting a lot of phone calls, to the point of 15, 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 phone calls a day at the house when he was not working. So it was in the evening. So one time I was talking to a friend, and I was a kid at the time. I was talking to my friend about whatever kids talk about, and in the middle of that conversation, there's a big click on the phone, and this guy comes in, he clicks through, he cuts off the phone call. And I was probably on for maybe 10, 15 minutes with my friend. Cuts out the phone call, and he says, excuse me, young man, you have to get off of this phone. You have to, this is the operator, you have to let this phone call go and stop talking to your friend. Something to that effect. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess the operator wants me to stop this phone call. And I'm a kid. And I realized, even though I was young, there was something real fishy about that. That was the beginning of me understanding that there was a lot bigger powers at play behind this free energy system. And then I started researching it all and taking it all in, the oil, petroleum industry. So fast forward 6 months, a year, 5 years, during that course of time, Joe Newman was getting more and more press. And the fight between him and the United States Patent Office was starting to get some press too, some kind of major press. And I think around that time, they decided, whoever they were, Joe Newman was talking about how people were coming to his house dressed in black suits, doing weird things, intimidating him, intimidating his wife and his family. And he had a pond that he used to basically breed catfish for food and whatever, and he also drank water and filtered it from there. He slowly but surely deteriorated in terms of he just started going off the deep end. Like, there was some real crazy things that he was starting to talk about. He was talking about seeing, like this God in the cloud. He was like wanting to do these crazy ceremonies, and he was always such a sweet guy. And I swear, I think my feeling is around him as the people that were trying to thwart him and others like him, which has been many thousands, they just basically took him out by making him seem like a psycho or like, whatever. Then he was killed. So they first off made him, in a way, delegitimize himself, and then, in essence, they took him out.
Which gets you to wonder about whether or not government programs that would utilize the human mind, or to even go down that rabbit hole. It's like, well, if you're going to do some sort of mind control, is it mind control?
Well, it's a facet. It's definitely a strong facet of mind control, that whole umbrella term of mind control. Think of it this way. If you're, there's many different forms of mind control. You can do like material. You can actually put frequencies into people. Everybody's heard about the brown note, right? The brown note is what is basically a part of the program, military program, to amplify and shoot frequencies into soldiers and get them to basically have their bodily functions go crazy, so they get out of focus and they become they become compromised. So that is a big part of it. In this case, I think the mind control factor was their intimidation process that lasted for about a year and a half. In fact, even my immediate family members were under some control factors as well.
Outside of even one, there were more than one family member involved.
All of us.
Impacted.
All of us were. Yeah.
Like physically.
Well, the physical aspect,
mentally
I would say it's much more of a mental kind of implosion that happened with the whole team of people that were trying to build around this free energy machine of Joseph Newman, which at that point my family was also in kind of like, okay, it's probably time for us to not be involved with any of that. My family member was working with some NASA stuff and working with some aerospace companies at the time as well, and some of them are most people would know the names of these places, and he was just having one of those things where he had to back up and get out of the whole Joseph Newman system there, because it was turning awry.
He died young.
I believe he died maybe at 55 years old or something like that. I don't know exactly how old he was.
How did that affect your family in general after that, as it digressed?
We shifted focus. We a part of the family thought of it as like, oh, he just went crazy. They kind of like they looked at it at surface value, like, oh, he just went crazy. He was under a lot of pressure. He was trying to get this free energy machine off the ground, put all of his time and energy and resources into it, also trying to raise a family. And they thought the pressures just got to him. But for me, it just didn't feel right in terms of how I had those interactions as a young guy.
Yeah.
And so that launched me right into questioning what the heck is going on with all that.
Well, and I want to go down that rabbit hole, but at the same time, it's hard not to stop, because I think one of the things that we'll keep trying to communicate in this show, in this documentary, was the impact at a 0 point at a single human being. There are examples of MKUltra and whatever government program, however it melded or gelled into this, but if you can have public statements on its effects. However, here it is at an individual level. I just think there's something to be impactfully said about the people directly involved with someone making free energy, and they don't see it as odd that he's erratic, gone from scientific, that these are the people directly side by side, and they not only don't see it, they don't sense it,
right,
and they're even experiencing their own. You said that they were experiencing even their own mental blocks.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, for me, having Joe at the time talk about how people are coming to his house, like that was the first indication that things were getting a little weird, in the sense it didn't seem normal that he didn't go crazy at first. He had people visiting him that he considered to be suspicious. They would come at all hours of the night around around the house, kind of freaking him out, doing weird stuff to that pond, which was interesting to me as a young guy.
Because, and your curiosity, you never knew what they actually did to the pond, but he ate out of that pond.
That's correct. And he also filtered the water out of there, and like, who knows what they were doing. They were basically doing an intimidation process. I do recall my family member receiving some kind of darker question calls where they were like, it'd be like a quick, like, you better get out of the business you're in. That kind of stuff. But the bigger story here is the Joe Newman evolution and his life.
Mm-hmm. There seems to be a disconnect with the intimidation factor. There's this gray area where, in messing with the pond, which was a food source, was it, as he was again going crazy, right away the go-to wasn't to eliminate anyone, it was to maybe psychedelically.
Yeah, there's something to that effect, which really connects very much into MKUltra. Back when MKUltra started, what was it, late 40s, early 50s, around there. At least that program. There's many mind control programs that have been going on for a long time, but that one is probably the most publicized. The MKUltra system and program really. A number of the individuals were really interested in LSD and different types of drugs to mood alter, to mind, whatever they're trying to do to basically find ultimate control over a population or a populace.
I think there's a lot of brute force involved, where I'm watching and looking at the studies, hearing the personal testimonies, and they're so hardcore trying to, they think it's like a hard drive that they can wipe the personality in the human being, that there would still be a functioning human being if you completely destroy them with LSD or some other electroshock or some combination where you've, in quotes, wiped them clean. But
sure,
reprogramming seems just about impossible. I mean,
it depends on what age your subject is. That is a huge part of mind control factors.
So,
but that gets deeper, though.
Well, let's go, right? So one of the things that we've talked about in the past, in general, is there's this history of, torture or experimentation on unwitting people that would have otherwise, maybe if it was a public program, maybe they would have participated if they had known that this would have been a value or service of our country or something to that effect.
Sure.
So it seems odd to me. There are things, though, that for people to actually verify or to look at that seem to be proof of, not of the activity of it, but almost the indifference to, or there's something to be said that the programs that they're using, they're also creating things that are patentable, right?
Oh, yes, 1,000%. They're absolutely patenting, using the United States Patent Office, which is an interesting entity if you want to go down a rabbit hole there as to what they accept and what they don't, and what they keep on record and public record, which is an interesting aspect. They actually present things out in the open that are vast technology, like the free energy stuff. There's lots of patents on free energy systems that are potentially not used for civilians. They're used for militaries. And that's just one, little tip of the iceberg of that.
So you're saying that, actually I haven't really talked too much on that. There is a possibility that militaries would be creating technologies that do not require energy.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, that's how they propel themselves interstellar, aspects, for sure.
So from a frequency,
it's one of the main ones.
Yeah, so from a frequency, energy, mind control standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to take you off of patents, but how does that translate then in Hollywood or in public or in music or in...
Well, it's all of the above here. So let's talk about this and get a little more specific, get some actual information for people to check out. First off, frequency is a huge part of mind control. So frequency, what am I talking about when I say frequency? Frequency can actually manipulate the neurological aspect, the biological aspect, the material world. You can depending upon how you do it. It also it brings in energy sources, energy sources with how to propel yourself with your systems. So what I'm getting at here is that frequencies are very, very important to mind control players in the systems.
So do you think it's a single... Well, okay, on one hand I would like to digress and ask about whether or not there's a single source at the top or a single institution, or if it's really divesting, not even mutually interested parties that seem to be overlapping in this world. But do you think any of it leads down in that when you say researchable from a patent standpoint, what else sticks out as interesting or a rabbit hole for people to dig in?
Okay, so let's talk about patents. So the patents, you can go on there and look up for example, a patent, United States 6506148B2, and the title of it is Nervous System Manipulation by Electromagnetic Fields from Monitors. And as we all know, right, we've got phones, we've got televisions, every restaurant, every bar, every place you go has monitor systems all around you. It's, in essence, this patent that I just talked about can basically send frequencies in a certain frequency range to manipulate the emotional content of a subject and get actually transfer information to get them to feel a certain way. And that is a very powerful tool to have if you want to control a population.
Do you think they were doing it even in the 80s or 70s or 60s?
They were developing it back in between World War I and World War II. If you think of it this way, why are TVs so important in the late 40s, early 50s? Every household had to get a TV, right? Television.
Well,
that's the beginning of it. And they called it programming. Whenever you watched any of these television shows, oh, here we are returning to the program. And it's absolutely right in front of your face.
The activities then seems to get more organized, or do you think the audacity or the boldness of the programs that come from MKUltra are a direct result of World War II?
I think that a big part of it was World War II funded and developed, but the programs really, I think, were even more developed on test subjects, not only in the Nazi regime, in Germany, where they were definitely testing frequency responses to their subjects, and with zero regard to any human condition. They were just simply doing terrible things using frequencies to people. So much that information that they garnered from those experiments actually transferred into Project Paperclip, which is another one to really check out. Project Paperclip is a vast resource. That term is a vast resource to figure out where some of these people and players are coming from and what they were doing during World War II and after and current.
Do you think of the programs that came from, or the results of MKUltras?
Sure.
Years of there. You made a point once that there is actual public evidence of them bragging about the success of the program.
I believe so. Yeah. I believe there's it's been going on for, let's see, about 80 years. This program is really, I mean, they might have it under the name MKUltra, which is kind of the main now public term for all these different projects that were underneath that. Many projects really ultimately come down into control. And mind control is a huge part of that, all of it, no matter what system you're talking about. MKUltra was, a very successful program.
Anything that do you think anything as it extended into Hollywood that stands out to you is just something that people could look at and just go, why or how?
Sure. So like the Hollywood stuff, like if we talk about Hollywood, we have to talk about the media itself. So politicians, celebrities, we talk about movies, we talk about television. They're all connected to each other, at least in terms of how we see and receive what's going on. And really, much of it is contingent upon a television. So when it comes to celebrities and their involvement, let's put it this way, Hugh Hefner was an interesting individual. He was the first one to come out with Playboy. What was the first issue? 1952, 53, somewhere around there. And who was the person that was on the cover? It was Marilyn Monroe, right? Marilyn Monroe, as we all know, had to change her name from Norma Jean. And if you really look far into it, it starts to get into what was going on there. Is Hugh Hefner just simply a proprietary individual, or was he a CIA guy? The CIA really did form about the mid-40s, late 40s, with a number of different individuals that were involved. And that CIA really had some clandestine motivations. One of them was ultimate honeypots. And honeypot system, if you don't know what the honeypot is, a honeypot is simply somebody who can influence an individual and compromise their disposition and even their standing, and or make them do things that they need them to do. So, it's a what you call an espionage tool. And what's going to be the ultimate honeypot? A celebrity.
And Marilyn
Monroe, awfully beautiful, very vulnerable, very sweet on the surface. She went through the system on Laurel Canyon. And let's look at Laurel Canyon real quick. Laurel Canyon, how many different celebrities and superstars came out of Laurel Canyon?
Well, and for those that don't know, what is that?
Laurel Canyon is an area of Southern California that seeming to be just flourished during the 60s for music, for celebrities, and military as well. Yes, there's a huge military installation there.
So Norma Jean comes out of this neighborhood.
Yeah, she was a part of the military installation there, according to what I understand it to be. And
just coincidentally becomes one of the biggest sex bombshells.
What a coincidence. Now, by the way, though, I really do love Marilyn Monroe. I think that she was an individual caught up in a bad game. That's what I think. And there's a reason why she was suicided, so to say,
Well, it wasn't sleeping with JFK?
I think that was also a takedown of JFK. At least that's my hypothesis at this point. JFK was actually potentially trying to take out some of the real nasty banking system people. And he wanted to eliminate the CIA, he wanted to eliminate the Federal Reserve. He talked about the military-industrial complex, just like Eisenhower did. And it's an interesting hypothesis to go down and think, was JFK brought down, and what was that whole publicity stunt with having Marilyn Monroe sing, what is it, like
Happy Birthday?
Happy Birthday, at the thing, in front of everybody, and including, Jackie O and all the thing. that could have been trying to take him down publicly, so half the United States looks at him like a cheater and a whatnot, but maybe he was a good guy.
Do you think this has anything, at what point do you think, particularly frequencies, at what point, and my background and my interest in archaeology or alternative archaeology and the history of the human planet, when it comes to frequencies and energy, for whether it's Hollywood or music in general, at what point do you think the frequencies we should be tuning into change? Do you think that was part of this or these programs, or was it coincidence and then well, I guess it's a two-part question. One is, did they start messing with frequencies as just a side thing, or was it very much obvious from, my hopes is that we discover one day that there was ancient ruins. They understood we were a frequency energy society, and they were able to back engineer it from the minute it would just look like a no-brainer from cymatic polygonal construction on. However, do you think that, we get RKO, we get records, do they start messing with music and the frequencies, or is it really the story as it goes? Just to set you up for a little bit further, World War II, the German socialists deciding to change the frequency to create chaos. Is that really just more of like a public distraction, or is that really part of the story of them deciding that there's too much organization in music, too much power in the sound and frequency, so did they reset it really in World War II, do you think?
Well, it's quite a coincidence that the changing of the industry standard of A440, 440 hertz is considered to be A. Your main thing, all tuners that you're going to find out there are currently calibrated to that. You can change the calibration, but most people stick to the industry standard, which was formed and developed and agreed upon in 1938 in Austria. Which, what a coincidence that is. Now, you mentioned cymatics. Cymatics, for anybody who hasn't checked that out, cymatics is the study of frequencies and responses to them. So you'll see people throwing sand onto plates and putting frequencies onto those plates. Often, depending upon the frequency, you can get these beautiful geometric symbols, sometimes known as sacred geometry, or you can get very chaotic frequencies. And 440 is a chaotic frequency. So for somebody, some entity, whatever it was, deciding that the industry standard had to be 440, which is different than the 1800s. Back in the 1700s, they had tempered pianos that had different frequencies. That right there can be an interesting aspect to making certain that all pop music, popular music, has a chaotic aspect to it.
Have you come across any programs that would indicate that would be of specific benefit to one particular organization or another, or country, or is it just a general chaos that we're aware of? We know that it affects every human and generally badly.
Well, that's a thing I've been really thinking quite a bit about for decades. As in, if you throw chaos upon a population, you go into like I said, every restaurant, whatever, you hear these music. The music is generally tuned to 440. Maybe you get more fights. Maybe you get more people killing each other. Maybe you get more, controlling a population type of aspects. I mean, statistically speaking, if you have 300 million people and you've got radio systems and speakers and monitors all playing a 440 music frequency output, you're going to have a statistical response from those 3 million. You're going to see a significant percentage of those people being affected by it and acting out with their emotions that way.
If you're going to get a society to change or to be susceptible to a program like you're in MKUltra, and you have you're having depression, and you know some of the victims that have come forward. I mean, just to talk on MKUltra for a minute, or whatever the program, to unwittingly walk into a therapist's office or to a collegiate environment that you think is there to help you,
mm-hmm.
it wouldn't hurt to have music like this on in the background.
Right.
Decision making.
It all depends upon what that office is aware of. Often most good people have no idea that potentially there's frequencies around them that are actually trying to make them so they can't exist better.
I should have framed it to you more like air. They're generally pumping out between your car, just when you're in earshot of something, you're hearing it in this tuning.
Right. Exactly.
So no matter where you are, the baseline, from the minute you are exposed to an external sound or image, it includes these frequencies, correct?
That's correct, yeah. You got it.
So does it affect anything? In general, are you aware of musicians in general that are willing to like change their band, or big bands or orchestras that are willing to like retune?
Yes, that is becoming more and more the norm with many different musicians and people making music. I do know that John Lennon, who's an interesting case, he recorded a number of his tunes, especially in later years of the what you call from the Beatles into the John Lennon thing. He recorded "Imagine," that song, which does have lyrics regarding world peace and like he was on that peace movement. He recorded it in a frequency that was not an A440. He had a tempered piano. In fact, it was like that legendary white piano that he had in New York City.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty successful song to say. And what happened to him?
True. From a healing aspect side, I mean, I know we touched on cymatics, but what, from a brain entrainment side, do you think, how susceptible is the human brain to influence, or if the baseline is 440, is there anything that you're seeing that's countering that? Or is there a way for someone to listen to their favorite music and change for instance, let's just say you made someone aware of it right now. So there's research history, there's go look up facts, but what could somebody do about their music right now if they just wanted to change what they heard, like a binaural beat sort of brain entrainment thing?
Oh, sure. Well, that's the cool thing about part of the accessibility factor of music these days. Very different than just having channels fed to you. Like television, you used to have like 3 channels back when what was it, in the late 40s, early 50s. Now, from 3 channels to 150 to 300 when cable came out in what was that, late 70s. Then now we're into the internet, where we can basically access any kind of information we really want, for the most part. And in that, you can find frequencies that are, binaural beats, like you were talking about, all the different types of non-A440 standardized frequencies. And even some of them are in question. You have to really know your stuff in order to make certain that it's not stuff that says it's like 528 or 432 or whatever it is, to realign and give you some of those frequencies that are potentially, helping you, as opposed to chaos and disorder.
You have some experience with Royal Rife machines, but do you find any specific frequencies that are better than others for people that don't know, we've gone over cymatics as a toolbox. There's a lot of different tools in that toolbox, but are there any that stand out as generally effective in, like almost like a Tylenol to the human mind or to the body? Is there some specific frequencies that people could kind of a go-to for having on in the background while they're either reading or moving or working or listening or watching something else? Is there something that stands out?
Yeah. In fact, the 2 frequencies that I mentioned that were the alternative ones, like 528 hertz, I find that I'll go online to try and find some sort of calming stuff, maybe meditational, maybe some sleep stuff that helps. 432 and 528 are 2 that I go to. I know that there's many other frequencies that other people resonate with. So it's a matter of finding
individual.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of general statistical aspects. Most people would probably feel 432 if it's presented well. Not always they might be playing the actual frequency, but it might be sharp and weird sounding. But most of the time it sounds great and it helps.
On an MKUltra stand,
Mm-hmm.
of the people you have researched as survivors, has anything stood out?
Yes, there's a number of people that I have come in contact with who are survivors of some of these, what you might call torture programs, and they are definitely rooted in transferring the knowledge of the Nazi experimentations for late World War I, early World War II, all the way to current. And those systems can really wipe somebody's memory. They can wipe their whole personality, turn them into more than even a honeypot system. They can actually turn them into a compartmentalized individual who can actually hide information even if they're tortured by an enemy. So there's so many different levels of this, how to transfer information in an international espionage situation.
Essentially treat a human being as a robot.
Absolutely right. Yeah. There's many systems on this planet that are absolutely considering humans to be programmable robots, biological robots, if you call it that.
Well, historically, when it comes to Montauk, when it comes to this history specifically, because I wanted to ask you about more stuff internationally or globally or what's current,
Mm-hmm.
but historically, what about the program has stood out to you as just like, it's all shocking, but
It really is. Yeah, there's some really dark aspects of it, but many of the people who are behind it don't realize that. Well, maybe they do realize that they're doing some pretty evil stuff.
So if you were to pick, I hate to put it in terms of favorite, are there stories that took you from MKUltra? Is there anything that stood out that took you down your own rabbit holes that you'd want to repeat now? Were there any specific stories of victimization or just, I can't believe they went down that one hole?
Yes, and actually the first story kind of relates to what you're asking. The first story that I would bring up right away that I find to be pretty interesting about the MKUltra project is the Dulles brothers. Now, the Dulles brothers, Alan and I can't think of his other name right now, but those guys' trajectory, they were super power players inside that system. They were big proponents of it, and if you observe it, you'll start to see that they were actually a part of the system and were basically taken out from the system.
Oh, fuck, we died.
That's all right. We got some fun stuff though. At least we're gonna die. Who knows?
Whatever, we got. How about I hit stop?
Okay.
So something we haven't talked about yet. Who are the players in the game of mind control?
Well, there's many players in the game of mind control, and many different countries and commonwealths have, like we've been talking about, much agenda towards developing mind control over populations. Not only their own populations, but other countries' populations, because it can really change the way things work out in terms of resources and money and power. Now, if we talk about money and power and whatnot, and we've talked a little bit about celebrities, but maybe we should talk about politicians and people who are in power in terms of, offices of the government, like the United States presidents. One of the more interesting presidents was one of the guys who helped form the CIA, and his name was George Herbert Walker Bush, named after George Walker, who's an interesting character, and Prescott Bush is his father, who is also one to research too, especially leading into World War II. Anyway, George Herbert Walker Bush, also known as Bush the First, was president of the United States, and he and his family, most notably George and his wife Barbara Bush, if you study any of these mind control programs, a lot of them have to do with presentation and how to speak publicly and what to do in order to really to get a statistical advantage over the thought processes of the viewer. And when they talk, Often, especially when they're emphasizing points, you'll notice that, and by the way, Barbara Bush was a master of this. They would not blink. They would stare straight into the camera and look at you straight forward without a blinking. And for some reason, that is a programming aspect. And I would imagine it's very powerful. I have yet to research really what the effect is upon the viewer. But I would imagine if you put that onto 1,000 people and you have that where you're not blinking, you're not changing, you're focusing straight, it entrains your audience, your whoever's observing your speech.
Any other presidents that stand out as?
Well, most of the presidents are part of.
Knowingly, you think, or are they themselves like programmed?
Well,
opinion.
Well, it's a pretty complex answer to really honestly say that.
What do you really think?
Well, it's exactly. So it's one of those things where, president to president, whether you like them or not, pretty much all of them, with the exception of just a handful, in the last 150 years, have had some sort of gun to their head and or programming aspects brought to them, either as children or as adults. And most of them are what some people call as farm kids. And farm kids is anybody who was born and raised into the CIA program and bred and raised to do certain roles within power systems.
There isn't a specific president that you think maybe tried to. A lot of people point to JFK, basically.
JFK is a power source because he's like the last one to be assassinated.
So he's somebody who decided to buck the system. Do you think?
I think he saw the systems coming into play, the ones that are the most important. And when he was a kid, into his early adulthood, he recognized it. He was a smart guy. His family was involved with it, but also bucked it themselves. So it's like he was brought into that whole system.
So for all the controversy with the Kennedys in general, and I think this is timely because I know from the time that we're filming, this will be dated in itself, but I think it is timely that the Kennedy foundations related to the historical Kennedys seem to be outing and have been outing a lot of these secret programs, haven't they?
It seems to be, absolutely. Like many of President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's speeches, he absolutely talked quite a bit about secret societies and people who are like handshake clubs, where they're just working against the will of the people. They're working for themselves. It's just a simple power grab, and that simple is very powerful. It still exists on this planet in much regard.
It's only been recently in my own research that it was pointed out to me the speech that Kennedy gave 48 hours before he died, and it was all about essentially calling out the powers that be.
Truly. Yeah.
And yet, the digression on the assassination is always on the mafia or...
Absolutely, yeah.
But yet 48 hours before he died, he gave one hell of a speech about...
He did?
Directly confronting clandestine powers.
Absolutely. I think that was one of his next big moves. And the interesting thing is, even to this day in Dallas, where he was assassinated, they still have the kind of like the museum of his assassination. It still talks about the one-person shooter aspect.
Do you think that, you're familiar with the speech I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
48 hours.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, as far as any presidential speech goes, it's pretty out there for odd, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. It's quite controversial, especially if you're somebody who's going to be at the receiving end of it.
Well, and it's not like I'm an expert in every presidential speech, but he essentially outlines that there are clandestine powers running everything, and that's a problem.
You got it. And specifically, he was targeting the money systems and the intelligence systems, also the media systems.
Well, and it comes full circle then with MKUltra, then, doesn't it?
It's very, very much connected to that. MKUltra is a CIA program. CIA was a huge Bush thing. He was the director of the CIA for a while. Then he became vice president under who was he was vice president under Reagan, and he was also had an assassination attempt. So it's interesting how Bush was alive and around during both of these assassination and an assassination attempt, which is an interesting aspect to me as well.
From a programming standpoint, then, where do you think the programs are showing up in our day-to-day lives?
Number one, the monitoring systems, where we're fed so much frequency in terms of, well, specifically, let's just talk about this last couple of years. We're in 2022 right now. There's such a push towards division and such a push towards disinformation and people getting the wrong information in this camp, fighting with the people that are getting wrong information in this camp. It's the old adage, you know. If you look at Orange Revolution, you study Orange Revolution, that idea, it's all about just dividing the population, have them fighting amongst themselves, much easier to control their whole system. So it's simple as that. And getting people to hate each other is how you control them.
Do you think there's
one of the reasons? One of the ways too. Yeah, one of the ways.
What do you think their highest and most goal-oriented reason is? The very top of it.
Well, ultimate world domination. Funneling the world's resources, all the labor, all the people, all the water, all the whatever you need to exist in this material world to benefit you.
Do you think there's a day-to-day single human being way to buck it or avoid it or fight it?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, the first level of that is be aware of it.
Do you think that there's anything they can do? Like, music is very powerful in people's lives.
Yeah, music can change everything, and in fact, music is a frequency. Often music, especially if we get off the A440 system. By the way, I don't think A440 is all bad. I just think it is a chaotic frequency that's a basis for a standard. But when you hear A440 music, many of the frequencies that are being broadcast are not just one single tone A440. There are many different frequencies that are on top of it that can actually kind of obscure the chaos factor of it. It can actually coalesce and bring things together. But frequency systems is probably the most important thing in terms of military aspects. I mean, like you can bust apart buildings, tanks, all these different things with nowadays you might call it the directed energy weapons and
scalar weapons.
Scalar weapons, yes, which scalar waves are also known as longitudinal waves. That was originally developed during Tesla. Tesla was one of the guys that kind of came out and started talking about it. And now that's another fun rabbit hole to go down and check out longitudinal waves and the death of Tesla.
Longitudinal waves, death of Tesla, and would there be a Bush involved in that?
Yeah, also an Edison.
just pointing that out for everyone.
Right.
Give people their rabbit holes and
it's all for hypothesis anyway, right?
Well, and then also for self-care and improvement, that I think one of for as much education can help, the other part is what is your favorite Led Zeppelin tune in 440?
Most Led Zeppelin stuff is in 440. Now, there's another way we can talk about this too. There's many systems put into music and movies and television that are all about garnering a different kind of response from the what you might call the observer, the public at large. So when you've got bands like Led Zeppelin or bands like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, many of these are UK-based stuff. The British Commonwealth, often they're tuned to 440, but not always. So that's an interesting aspect.
So would you say there's conscious rebels? Maybe?
Yeah. There's definitely some rebels even within the system. People that were born and raised into it, they break out and they do things that potentially get them put into harm. But there's also people that support it too, in terms of trying to just be elite, just be powerful, you know. Tavistock is an interesting aspect of different levels of mind control systems. We got Tavistock, we've got, you know, it depends upon what part of the world we're looking at. And Tavistock, there's some lore about how a number of the different scientists there helped the Beatles write some of their music, which I don't know that much about yet.
Which can't really say much more about Jimi Hendrix either, then.
Well, you know, like, let's put it this way. What was the 27 Club all about? As in, why were so many musicians killed at 27, so to say? That's another quick question to check out. Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse.
At 27.
27 years old. And I don't know if there's much to that number or that age or whatever, but maybe at that time that's when they were starting to be a part of the system, getting famous from it, so to say, and rich. And then everything was taken away because maybe they were starting to be conscientious objectors to whatever war systems or whatever power systems were going on. I don't know, though. That's one of those things that's just a hypothetical to research further. Bob Marley, right there, he's in it too.
Is there anything that's standing out to you? What are the strangest things about MKUltra or any of the programming that you're seeing? Of as weird as it all is, what is the standout for you? That is
the standout for MKUltra system, I would say, is the control of a population through any means necessary. And what they did, whoever was behind it, and other systems too, is they looked at music, they looked at water. Like there was a number of reports of like putting LSD into certain communities and seeing how it turned out. Flint, Michigan is a pretty recent aspect of that, where the water had some questionable things happening to it. Yeah, in fact, there was a speech that President Obama gave in Flint, Michigan about the water, which is a fascinating video if you can find it.
Really?
Yeah. And he's definitely not being nice to people there.
What did he basically imply? The water is healthy?
Yeah, he drank it right on stage. He says it's fine.
Oh no.
Yeah. And he looked at the people and he basically just kind of gave them the middle finger. And the people that were there were like, "What? What is this? Is this hope?"
So you're looking.
I'm not ripping on Barack Obama. I'm not ripping on any of these presidents. I'm just talking about their actions being in question.
Well, if it's findable, he did it live and basically by the river?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. That was an interesting speech. It's one that you just wouldn't see, you would think a dignified president of the United States would do. Or a president of any country, in essence, you know. But,
no.
Yeah, so it's one of those fun things to check out, depending upon where you are. You know, like you know, there's many people love these individuals, and I know that I'm saying some controversial things about them, but you know, it's all just in question for me.
Is there anything else about the program specifically you would want to talk about?
Let's see, the MKUltra project. Well, the mind wiping aspect of it, and the overall way of controlling a populace. Those are the two things that I focus the most on. How to control your subject.
How barbaric it is, or
yeah. There's some terrible ways that the CIA, under the guise of MKUltra, tried. They used frequency weapons. And CIA is kind of now connected into DARPA, which DARPA is now the more current, arguably more sinister than the CIA MKUltra project, where they would use frequency radiation. They would use what you call the voice of God technology, which is basically where they use a frequency to throw into an individual's head to make them think that they're being guided by God.
Are there patents that stand out for any of this?
Yes, yeah, there are, and it's it's kind of a thing where you have to sit down and really find those patents. But for some reason, they're patented. And I know that many patents are also hidden from the public as well.
You mentioned that earlier. Did you want to say anything else about it?
The United States Patent Office is one of these offices that is in fact compromised in many ways. I would say it's like an 80-20. 80% of it's just fine and dandy. 20% of it's in question because they definitely have a lobby or a contingent that makes them not let the public come into what's going on potentially in the military and underground projects, secret black ops projects, and stuff that actually affects the population.